Good morning. I'm Mark Allen with Gaper.io, and I'm here today with Mark Halberstein, the CEO of Simplenight. Good morning, or good afternoon in your case, Mark. How are you doing?
Hi, Alan. Good. How are you?
Good. So to start with, can you share a brief background of yourself and your work experience?
Sure. So originally from Miami, currently based in New York. Got my MBA in Miami in finance. Went to go work for JP Morgan in the investment bank. From there, I went to go work for a fund, a large fund in New York called Allied Partners, where I became director of asset management. It specializes in the real estate space, so I oversaw kind of the ownership and management of assets like hotels and malls and kind of big types of buildings, so to speak, like that. And then after a while, felt complacent and decided to start a concierge business. It's more of my passion. As a hobby since college, I'd always been serving as a resource to people of kind of where and when to go and how to kind of make it happen. And something I was more passionate about, and decided to start a concierge business. And I targeted all of the people from my network, so corporate sector, banks, law firms, real estate brokerages, that eventually took me into the celebrity space, where I was planning things like Sundance Film Festival and Cannes for celebrities and film casts and crews. And it was a really exciting and thriving business, but it was having difficulty scaling to where I wanted to take it. So I looked to kind of pivot into the technology space and founded my existing startup, Simplenight, which I've been doing now for about 7 years.
Oh, wow. That's a long time. So what has been your experience with remote employment, both as a remote employee and a remote employer, and before the current virus?
Yeah. So while I was at JP Morgan, it was interesting. It was before Dropbox was a thing. There was different offices, and we would be interacting via kind of a shared file storage, system that they had. But the issue was that if somebody went in and moved the file or changed the name or deleted something, you had to go then call tech support to figure out how to get it back. So it was really risky. It was very unsecure. And I spent a lot of time actually helping to clean that up for on JP Morgan's behalf for our department. And as part of that, we would have lots of frequent calls. So every week you'd have all the different divisions calling in. Of course, you would have to account for people's time zones. So people in Asia, if there were any, or people on the West Coast, it was either very early or very late. And you'd always notice that, those people really wouldn't have a pep in their step, so to speak. So that was always fun. There wasn't really any virtual video type of stuff going on at the time. Next, as I moved into the fund side, it was more about call it virtual workspace. So the logins, so to speak, you could kind of access your remote desktop on the weekends or wherever, if you were away, so you could access your desk. A big theme was about security. So you couldn't really have your stuff hit your work and proprietary information on your own computer at home. So you'd have to access it remotely. That was a big theme, especially with the bank, and then it carried on with the fund too. So it was about this: how do you work when you're not in the office? And I think it was less of a thing. This is goes back to kind of the mid 2000s, sort of mid 2000s, and it's definitely changed as it's moved along. The remote concept has grown. When we started the technology business, kind of in the early days, we wanted to employ contractors overseas for better rates than necessarily hiring them in New York or San Francisco. So kind of right away, we got into the whole remote concept, and we used Skype. I mean, that was like second nature to us. There was no Slack. So it was a very heavy kind of Skype dynamic almost daily. That was your way of kind of videoing with people or just having Skype calls for overseas. And we used Atlassian's product Jira for kind of call it project management. And that was in a way of interacting with people, right? Or just emails. There wasn't even WhatsApp really. It wasn't really a thing either. So that was interesting to see. And how it's evolved now to kind of where things are at. But it was nice. I mean, I would say that we grew a team over the span from, call it, the end of 13, beginning of 14 till through the end of 16. We grew to about 65 people.
Hmm.
Probably a third of those were remote overseas. Some of the ones in the States were in cities like San Francisco or in Texas or Atlanta and Portland, Oregon. So those people were technically remote as well. And I have to say that coming from a corporate background where you have to kind of leave your work at the office and there's really none of this concept of
Hmm.
pure remote type of inter-office communication and community, it became second nature. And
Hmm.
we didn't really, I honestly couldn't tell you the difference. Like, it wasn't that the people that were sitting in front of me in New York, and we had a lot of people in New York, that their productivity was any worse or better than the people that were remote. The only thing that was obviously lacking was how to bring them into the community.
Hmm.
But what was really nice to see, and this I think is just really special, is I would kind of learn about, through the grapevine that the employees would be creating like trips amongst themselves, right? So like
Hmm.
the person in Portland and the one in New York and one in Europe or something, they got together in Europe and they kind of got together and traveled, as a group. And I think that's just really awesome when it kind of transcends beyond the office the right way.
Yeah,
Um,
just
nice to
organically.
see. Yeah, that was really cool. I saw that a lot, and I think there were a lot of really tight friendships that have been formed from kind of our team along through the years. People that are still with us, people that are not no longer with us. It's nice to see that. We have kind of a very strong theme of community, despite at least a third of our workforce being remote.
Wow. And then just out of curiosity, I know the industry you're in, does your company get travel discounts because of that?
Yes,
That makes
it's
it,
it,
that is a nice perk.
Yeah, no, it is really good because let's say we sign a vendor in Morocco, they'll kind of tell us, come check out, come check it out. And typically it's on the house, most of the time, or at least
Huh.
at a steep discount. So, and that extends to everyone in the business, right? So we're really good about, it's a good perk. Even our developers who, you would never really touch the front line of the product you're developing, they get to access that too. It's actually really one of the biggest interests that we see from the kind of tech world when they get involved with us in the development side is that they just really like the subject matter. It's something very different than they're used to
Yeah.
playing, and we let them touch it as much as possible.
And you said your headquarters is in New York, but your remote employees, do you have remote offices or do the remote employees all work from home?
We do have we have a remote office in San Francisco. There were plans to add some more in London and other markets. So we do still continue to expect that we will. We'll be opening a Miami office later this year. And but for now, obviously, given the current situation, everybody's from home.
Hmm.
Um, and like I said, it doesn't really, for us, it's not a big difference in terms of productivity. I think there's certain um, feelings that you need to kind of be in tune with to make people more comfortable and at ease, because you understand that people are at home when there's everybody's there, families, kids, children. So it's a balancing act of how to get your space and your time and focus, right? But I think being sensitive to that is key. Understanding, that certain formalities, being flexible there, where it's like you're not going to expect someone to be dressed up in a suit and tie or well dressed all the time, right? But making sure that you're presentable, of course. Maybe sometimes video is not going to work because just there's bad connection, or
Hmm.
there's stuff going on in the background, right? And they need a little bit of privacy. Like, that's okay too, right? It's being flexible and sensitive, I think, is really key right now.
Yes. So what do you think is the future of remote employment and what do you think can be done differently to make it more effective?
Well, so I'll give you an analogy. When I first started the tech company, I, coming from a real estate background, was like, you know, knew very well about negotiating leases and office space and sublets and so forth, and was able to, get a good situation or work in what was a kind of corporate co-working space, so to speak. Then when WeWork came out, I checked it out, their first couple of spaces, and said, let me just see. And remember thinking, I'm never going to use this. It's not going to be a thing that I get involved with. Several years later, we're purely 100% on WeWork. And so drawing that to kind of where we're at now, I think that most organizations that weren't remote and that were still old school, so to speak, of you leave your work at the office, very corporate security, you can't have access to the things that you need, you got to get into that office space, is going to be completely changed. I think office leases and office landlords are going to suffer dramatically for a long time. They're going to have to reinvent their business models. You're going to see a lot more landlords creating their own co-working environments. They're going to have to, almost like their own food courts, right? And food halls. And but for startups and other businesses where you'll have like a insurance business, a tech business, manufacturing bit, whatever, they got to get creative and flexible. And I think that whether it's a startup or a technology company or any small business, medium-sized business, they're going to still want to have some sort of community space, but it's how flexible can that be, and how much is too much remote versus one or the other extreme. I think it's going to take some time to work out that balance, but that's one area that's is changing in front of all of us. The other area is, of course, corporate travel and corporate expenditures is getting a reality check as well. So do you need to go to 10 different conferences throughout the year? Do you really have to go to a sales meeting away abroad every single time? Well, why, you did it remote for 4 months, and there was no other option. So I think it's created that aha moment to a lot of business owners.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I used to have salespeople ask me to go on sales meeting, go from San Francisco across the country for a 1-hour meeting. And I'm like, I'm losing 2 days for 1 hour. Can't we do my part by Zoom or Skype? I used to do that regularly. So.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's certain things that you can't replicate virtually. I mean, you can come close, but it's still, so I presented earlier this week at a venture summit, and you can't really see who's in the crowd, right? You don't know, you can't connect that way. Right. So I think that's one limitation, but again, that is the once in a while type of thing. It doesn't need to be the everyday. So I think much like your experience with the sales meetings, we've been operating that way too, with the high touch with partners. We have very large partners. And so you want to really give them all of you. But if they're stuck at home and you're stuck at home, and you start to kind of figure it out and move business forward. I mean, when times are not like this, you kind of think to yourself, okay, well, neither party really has to travel so much if we made it work back then. So, make it more about a once in a while thing, just for the novelty of it, which will be nice. But I think it's just going to go into continue. I think you're going to see a lot more virtual everything.
Yeah, no, I agree. So what's the story behind Simplenight? Who are your customers? What do you provide? And what's the journey been like?
So we're a B2B platform. We provide the ability to enable our partners to sell in-destination products and services, things like hotels and events and attractions, dining, transportation, and other types of upsell options built into their ecosystem and brand touch points. So whether it's their website, their mobile app, their email marketing, anywhere they want to stick our software, they can, and now they can upsell global inventory to a willing audience and monetize it. Customers of ours include Google, automotive companies like Jaguar Land Rover. We work with corporate travel agencies. We work with governments. We license them our software. So you think you're using Jaguar's cool new concierge-like digital interface. And while you're driving, you can order food delivery or make a restaurant reservation or book tickets to a concert, and knows where and when you're going. So it's in tune with giving you personalized recommendations. And we're just making the magic happen for these brands that you've loved over the years. They just get better, and we're the secret sauce behind the scenes.
Oh, very good. And you're a SaaS offering, I presume?
Yes.
That makes sense. So how did you incorporate the idea of remote at your company? Since you started, what, about 7 years ago? Did you start out remote, or did you start out, brick and mortar and then go to remote?
We started out brick and mortar, and it was 100% brick and mortar. Then, we've had and kind of continue to build on a network of ambassadors of ours. Those are concierges around the world that help us really curate and localize content. So it could be someone in Finland or Spain or Australia. And, we're not interacting with them every day, but we've always had that abroad network. And, we deal with them on, like I said, Skype before there was WhatsApp. Now it's WhatsApp. Or, in terms of the core team members, we're dealing with Slack in the last couple of years, and Google Hangouts, which has only been around for a couple of years. We use Zoom, of course, as well. And Skype is becoming less and less prevalent, which is so interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
I know Microsoft just launched their new product, so maybe that, we'll see if that takes off. I think there's a bandwidth issue, right? So that's one thing I've noticed is there should be more bandwidth startups, right? Like whoever kind of comes in and starts changing that game, it's going to do a lot for the whole virtual movement. And so when we started, we were 100% brick and mortar, non-remote. Then we started adding more overseas people and became more remote at kind of full blast. We were about a third. So it was almost a daily stand-ups remote at different time zones. If you ask me now, I never sleep that much, but I'm doing calls in Asia and West Coast. So a lot of work happens kind of at night.
Mm-hmm.
I try and avoid really like the early morning stuff, like the 4 a.m.s and the
Mm-hmm.
3 a.m. stuff, but I've done those in the past too. I think it's important with remote, and a big theme forward is how do you give the best of yourself when you are interacting with someone remotely? How do you create that bond and that sense of community where it's like you guys were just having coffee together, and
Mm-hmm.
make up for that connection and that those emotions, that type of interaction. And I think there's going to be, interesting things that happen, whether it's quirky things like backgrounds or themes, right? Like of conversations or topics, just to change it up. Or like I said, it could be something where people are like, okay, everyone's going to wear red today, right? And like everyone that's on the video chat is wearing red. And I think things that help unite people, change it up, give people, adding humor,
Mm-hmm.
topics that people can kind of converse about is important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Have you had any contests where you vote for the best virtual background yet? I've heard of those.
And some of them have been really interesting.
Have you seen the Brady Bunch one?
No, not yet. But
I'll share that with you later.
no, but it's funny. It reminds me of there was a movie, Forgetting Sarah Marshall, several years ago. And it was about like the kind of changing the backgrounds, like comical backgrounds. So they were just ahead of their time with
Here,
Bill Hader.
I'll bring it up. I have it right here.
Oh my God. That's really funny.
Yeah. There we go.
That's
I'm
great.
Alice.
That's amazing. There you go. Another business model of digital backgrounds, virtual backgrounds.
Actually, that would be a good one. So the current pandemic has caused a lot of companies to go remote. In the Bay Area, it was March 16th. I know. I think it was the week after in New York.
Just about.
Did that cause any roadblocks or challenges that you didn't expect?
So I would say I remember I was actually booked to go to San Francisco right around that time. So the immediate kind of step was, well, now you got to go and scramble and cancel all your plans, right? That
Mhm.
you were about to go in this, within days or weeks. Then it's the next thought is, okay, so as I'm doing that, it's panic. But
Mhm.
what happens to all my meetings and appointments that I've done? Investors, partners, etc. Are they going to, obviously they're going through the same thing, but are they going to be like scrambling themselves to even respond? Or, is it just going to be completely an indefinite kind of ice? Like, we'll deal with it eventually when things resume months or
Mhm.
years from now. So I think that was a big level of uncertainty at kind of the first um, moments of all this starting. And then once, I think after like a week or two and having a few of those kind of key meetings virtually, right, and making both sides feel comfortable, I think it was like, okay, that much more confident. Let's go back to business as usual, realizing that there's going to be certain, if you have 10 things you're working on, whether, probably, companies that you're talking to that, maybe a third of those or more are going to go out of business, have significant layoffs where the people you're dealing with are no longer there. We've seen that with some really large companies. I mean, maybe like Monday, we're getting ready to like get into like a contract with someone, and then we get the next day, hey, they canned our whole team, right? And like,
Wow.
or hey, we've been working for 6 months with you. Hey, I'm furloughed until the end of the year. And
Mhm.
you kind of think to yourself, it's like, is it really going to be end of the year? Or are you just never coming back, right? So I think that a third of our interactions with other companies have been like that, where people have been let go, there's furloughs, or kind of this, you know, let's put everything on hold and we'll figure it out when things subside.
Yeah. Well, Mark, I want to thank you for your time today. I wish you luck. I'm glad Simple Night has weathered the storm. And thanks again and have a great day.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Bye.
Take care. Bye.